Welcome to today's lecture on traditionalism and female bhaktas. I am going to discuss the hidden psyche that played a very important role, and one needs to analyze the unconscious thought process of the female bhaktas that brings us much closer to the predicament of the 12th century Veer Shaivite women saints. The patriarchal language structure that emerges in most of the spiritual outpourings of various bhaktas can reflect a lot of light and also a deeper understanding of the kind of paradoxes that were existing. The simultaneous functioning of the patriarchal language structure, which was visible in the vachanas, even though there was an urge to break free of this very patriarchal structure, and the inability to do so in absolute terms was, however, grounded in social reality. As a result, what emerged was the process of adopting the deviant. It was the oppressive social patriarchal structure which the spiritual men or women mystics sought to reject and subvert. But in due course of time, sometimes they would themselves fall victim to it. Spiritual poetry, the vachanas that were written by the Veer Shaivite women Shivasharanas, is therefore best described as the language of madness, holiness and poetry. Despite the use of several patriarchal symbols, it was very much deviant in its direction and content, as it did not fall within the stereotypical kind of a description of religion or identity with religion. So these female bhaktas made use of sexual imagery in several of their vachanas in the context of their union with the Supreme. For women, the metaphors of sexual union came naturally. They were intense and quite bold. The influence of the Shaktas and of Tantricism was also visible in several of these female saints. As was pointed out by Akka Mahadevi, in our embrace the bones should rattle in a welding. The welding mark even should disappear. So the sexual imagery is quite visible in these lines, and they had no inhibition in singing or in writing those vachanas in the public domain. Now the image of nurturing women, however, continued to have its mark. The image of a mother was often in contrast to the image of the barren woman, which in the mystic terminology implied spiritual barrenness and not physical or biological barrenness. So Basavanna's wife Gangama Bike's verses are notable for the image of herself as the spiritual mother and Shiva as her child. So in one of the vachanas, Gangama Bike says, "My child Shiva has not gone anywhere. My Chenna Basava come to the breast of Gangama Bike." So these are some of the images that refuse to die down. A woman as a mother, a woman as a nurturer, even in the vachanas of several female bhaktas. Then Akka Nagamma, she also addressed Basava as if he were her husband and said, "Since Basava's death, I have become a widow without ornamentation." Dilip Chitre, in his extensive work on the Varkari tradition of Maharashtra, had coined the term orature. Bhakti poetry is not literature but orature. The Bhakti poet travelled from village to village, and while doing this, while they were in this process, they would also kind of recite their poems. So this was more of an orature. the nomadic practices of the Bhakti poets gave rise to a cult of travelling bards, and the natural habit of Bhakti poetry has been performance, something that has been discussed at length by Dilip Chitre. Now coming to the subject of Varkari women saints, the translations of Abhangs by 10 prominent and lesser known Marathi women saints who belong to this movement gave an insight into their philosophy. Their Abhangs are not just expressions of devotion but also an attack and a criticism on patriarchy as well as caste hierarchies. So just like the earlier Bhaktas were writing or saying vachanas, the Varkari women saints, they used to compose Abhangs. Now one very important saint, a female saint, Kanho Patra, who was a 14th century saint and who probably worked as a sex worker also, was the object of male lust, and her devotion to Vithala was a protest against the patriarchal world which had enslaved her body, and she declared that while her body could be enslaved or could be made use of, no one could touch her spirit. So therefore these were the ways that were adopted to show their disdain for the society. Similarly, Bahina Bai, who was a 17th century female saint, was able to liberate herself as well as her husband from the clutches of patriarchy through her faith. Her songs are a narrative of her life, telling of simple joys and sorrows of life, her day-to-day activities, and her husband initially did not come across as a very cooperative or a nice man to her, but she succeeded in changing him eventually. The 17th century was also known for emerging discrepancies that were there as far as the lives of some other female bhaktas were concerned. So we have Soyara Bai, the wife of an outcast saint, Chaukamela. Soyara had an acute awareness of the injustice that she faced, and also she was very sad for the kind of treatment that was meted out to her husband. But she also had a philosophical ability to confront the contradictions of the caste system, which again she expressed in her Abhangs, and so she also emerged as an independent woman. So what we need to undertake is some kind of explanation of the linguistic manifestations, the magical language, the tones of speech, the steep climb and descent of the singer's voice, as well as the repetitive use of certain words and phrases in these vachanas or in these abhangs. And so the most important part of a bhakti was not what it says. So it was not the subject which was important, rather it was the orature, the style of bhakti that made use of magical language, that had a magical influence on the listeners, and it cultivated the paradox as well as it initiated a secret language within a language. So that is what is the beauty of bhakti literature. Now coming to the language of bhakti, it is similar to the initiatory languages of tribal people or the mystic languages of the folk traditions, and this is how one can distinguish a bhakti poem or a bhakti vachana and abhang from a more traditional or a kind of a literary creation that belongs to the high culture. Now a very important aspect that I am now going to discuss is the historicity of women bhaktas. Several women bhaktas went beyond the shadowy realms of the past and are very much alive today in the popular culture of the day-to-day life in several regions of India. So the collective memories and the remembrance, which are based on their bhajans or vachanas, the spiritual songs, poems, abhangs, can give a few glimpses of the lives of these women in medieval times. So most of these sayings, they refer to two very important themes, and these are the themes of childhood and marriage, as well as the later spiritual retreat, which appears as a very decisive event in their life. Many of these women had to struggle for acceptance within the largely male dominated movement. So it was only through the demonstration of their utter devotion to the divine, their poetry, their stubborn insistence on following the spiritual path, and also their their inbent nature to pursue the path of bhakti, that they came to be reluctantly acknowledged and accepted within the ranks. However, this process was not easy, and it also took a much longer period of time as compared to what the male bhaktas would have encountered. Their struggle also conveys the strength of traditional values within the society as well as within the bhakti movement, and how it was very difficult to come across an egalitarian philosophy being accepted easily. While the male bhaktas were accepted as the householders, and the wives would silently give in to the aspirations of a male member of a family if he wanted to become a bhakta, or if he wanted to pursue the path of bhakti. The same, however, was not the case with the wives. So a wife had to either leave their home in order to pursue the path of bhakti. They had to focus on inner devotion, the concept of love, and also the same was the problem that was faced by the lower castes. There was definitely a biased attitude to women, and though many of the bhakti saints were looking for change, they were clamoring for change, and they questioned the existing hierarchies and injustices, women, however, were not considered as a party to this change, or they were not considered as the subject matter of this change. They could not rise above the age-old prejudice of regarding women as a barrier to the path of salvation. The bhaktas felt that both women and gold, signifying desire and worldly possession, had to be shunned, they had to be given up, they had to be rejected in order to achieve the path of salvation. So we can definitely say that the saints were living in a patriarchal society and holding patriarchal values, which considered a man superior and a woman subordinate. They could not rise from the traditional view of looking upon women as Maya and an obstacle to the path of bhakti rather than an equal participant in it. A woman's status was defined in terms of her role in the family as compared to her husband, and she had no worth outside the institution of family and marriage, and it was very important for her to continue serving her husband as well as her in-laws. Now this was the very authority which several female bhaktas rejected, and they just walked out of their marriage. And one such female bhakta was Akka Mahadevi. She was the daughter of a rich merchant in the village of Udutal during 12th century. She was a great devotee of Shiva, and ultimately she was forced to marry a chieftain of the land named Kausika, who was an unbeliever, and Akka Mahadevi was married against her wishes. The legend about Akka Mahadevi goes that she warned her husband that she would leave him if he touched her thrice against her wishes, and when he did so, she left him. And as she left the family as well as her husband, she broke all the marital relations as well as her clothes and she started walking out, roaming around naked. And it was in this phase of her becoming a nomad that she started also composing vachana. So one such vachana says, Mother, because they all have thorns in their chests, I cannot take any man in my arms, but my Lord white as jasmine. And like Andal, Akka Mahadevi too was in love with her personal God, the divine God. And so in another vachana she says, I am the woman of love for my Lord, white as jasmine. The Lord white as jasmine is the Ankita or the signature of her poetry. So this is how these female bhaktas, they used to develop a signature for their poetry, and this phrase was repeated again and again. Her human suitors do not measure up to her, while the white jasmine Lord was so pure, and he was probably the only one who was fit enough to be her husband. So Akka Mahadevi stood for the women liberated by the path of bhakti. It was within her power to choose and to refuse. Her poetry definitely bears the stamp of radical illegitimacy, and the resistance to the male-centered ethos of her age is definitely woven into the fabric of her poetry. Then another female bhakta that one can discuss is Sule Sankava. Sule Sankava was a contemporary of Akka Mahadevi, and she is survived by a single poem in which Shiva is portrayed as Nirlajjeshwara, the god without shame. Sankava speaks of herself as a prostitute, though it is unclear whether this was historically true or it was deliberately projected by her in order to show her at an extreme end of marginalization. So it is likely that she was employing this term as a metaphor for the relationship she has with her personal god. Shiva in her verses was most commonly portrayed in literature as an ascetic bachelor. So most of the literature or most of the conventional poetry, if one goes through, we find that Shiva is portrayed as an ascetic bachelor, whereas Sankava portrayed him as a shameless solicitor of women. Within the poem, as the realms of the sacred collapsed with the realms of the profane, the subversion of the Shiva legend is absolute. So Akka Mahadevi and Antal have shown similar callousness in approaching the notions of purity and holiness. So even within this shamelessness or within lack of purity or not falling within the boundaries of pure and impure, there could be a path of bhakti. Now coming to the next female bhakta, that was Andal. Andal yearned for the Lord of Dwarka and offers him not sacred flowers or ritualistic gifts but her breasts. So while Akka Mahadevi claimed that her Lord claimed as tribute, my pleasure took over all of me. So this was an open there was an open discussion about the kind of pleasure these women were getting out of their union with the supreme god. These poems created a scenario within the gods did not frown down or look down upon the sexuality of women. This was not the case with the poems of the male poets of the bhakti tradition, and herein lies the difference between the two. So one can clearly see some kind of a feminist rebellion in their poetry. Akka Mahadevi insisted that in bhakti, the principle of pleasure is invested equally in men and women. The feminism of the bhakti movement in the south was definitely initiated by these poets. Now another very important female bhakta or we can say an important saint, was Molla. In the early 16th century, a young woman from the Potter class wrote a new version of the Ramayana in Telugu. It was an extraordinary feat for Molla to rewrite the epic, and as the legend says it was done within a few days, as has been pointed out by Tharu and Lalitha. So what emerges is the image of a very confident Molla. Molla did away with the traditional introduction, which was intended to establish the ancestry as well as the literary lineage of the poet. Instead, Molla paid a simple tribute to her artisan father. So she kind of acknowledged her father, who belonged to a marginalized caste. And she says, I am God's gift to him. They call me Molla. So that was the simple introduction that she gave. Her confidence was visible in the words, I am no scholar, I know no rules of combination, no large vocabulary. So still she was venturing into the field, into this into this genre of writing about Ramayana. Now this as has been pointed out by Tharu and Lalitha, one can say that there was defiance in her declaration. Because she belonged to a low caste woman, it was mandatory that Molla used a tone of diffidence if her work was to be acknowledged. Molla was no stranger to the disdain of the upper classes, and so this disdain was also experienced by several other unorthodox Veer Shaiva saints. However, the rebel Molla refused to be bowed down, and she held firm to the view that women were of the same status as men. Stories passed down through the oral tradition make it clear that Molla was a rebel. It is said that the loss of her mother at an early age probably made her grow into a bold and a very confident woman. She even attempted defying the king Krishna Dev Raya, because she did not dedicate her work to the king, which was customary during those periods. So the Molla Ramayan is dedicated directly to Ram, her Kanth Mallesh. So therefore we can say that Molla's poetry broke several literary conventions. It was meant to be sung out loud, not chanted in reverence. Molla's refusal to adhere to the conventions of the classical epic and her brave depiction of Sita are very important indicators to the direction in which women's writings of the Bhakti tradition were pointing to. Next, we can discuss Lal Ded, who lived during the 14th centuries in Kashmir. We have a number of legends which talk about the cruelty meted out to Lal Ded, who had been married at the age of 12 years. She endured this torture for 12 years and finally left home. She now came to be known as Lal Ded. Lal in Kashmiri means the lower part of her belly, which increased in size and hung loose over her lower region. Then a very important female bhakta was of course Mirabai, and as a young girl Mira pestered her mother to tell her who was her bridegroom, and when she saw a marriage procession, to avoid persistent hankering, Mira's mother just pointed out to the statue of Krishna and told her that probably this was her bridegroom. And Mira grew up thinking that she was married to this bridegroom, that was Krishna. And when she was married into the royal family of Sisodia Rajputs of Mewar, she refused to consummate her marriage, regarding herself already wedded to Krishna. Now this was an open defiance, and her in-laws refused to tolerate this. There were series of attempts at her life, and finally she left the palace and started staying independently in a temple, wandering around in the company of other saints. Another example was Sahajo Bai from 1683 to 1765. In many of her verses, she described the hard work, the grinding corn, the carrying water, sweeping, digging, and she acknowledged that while she was working so much, she was getting lot of energy from her prayers. And Sahajo's verses are collected in Sahaj Prakash, which is the major text of the Chandradasi sect. Then there were female bhaktas like Diwali Bai and Gaura Bai. The lives and poetry of these bhaktas have been documented in Gujarati and English anthologies. Diwali Bai was a Brahmin child widow from Deobhul. Her father was very poor and therefore he left her in charge of a saint Dadu Guru Bhagwan, who was a devotee of Ram and hence taught her the whole of Ramayana. Then Ganga Sati was another bhakti poetess of Gujarat who has handed down all her compositions through the oral tradition. Ganga Sati was a devoted Rajput woman married to Kahluba in the village in Saurashtra. While Kahluba, according to a legend, was asked by his fellow Rajputs to prove his faith by bringing a dead cow back to life, and he did this exactly and he was able to. But he refused to live a life after that and he took a Mahasamadhi. And after that, it was his wife Ganga Sati who carried on the tradition. She became a bhakta and she composed a set of 40 bhajans and passed it on in a formal way to her fellow bhaktas. Similarly, there was Sant Toral and there are so many other female bhaktas, but since time is running short, so I would now take a break and I would continue with the lecture in future. Thank you.